The Great Depression was a time like no other, and for families during this difficult period, preparing a meal wasn't just about eating. Simple, cheap dishes became lifelines, offering nourishment in the best way possible. In today's video, we'll take a look at 20 budget-friendly recipes that helped families survive the Great Depression. These aren't just recipes, they're a part of our history. 1. Bread pudding. Let's begin with bread pudding, a classic comfort food with roots that trace back to times when wasting food was simply not an option. During the Great Depression, bread pudding became a go-to dish, often prepared with stale bread that would otherwise go to waste. By adding simple ingredients like milk, eggs, and sugar, one could transform leftover bread into a sumptuous meal. Traditionally, bread pudding is made by soaking chunks of stale bread in a sweet custard mixture, then baking it into a soft, aromatic meal. It was a very flexible recipe, relying on basic ingredients that were readily available to most households at the time. Ingredients like raisins, cinnamon, and vanilla could be added for extra flavor, though many families during that era simply made do with the basics. What makes bread pudding particularly special is how it's so versatile. You can make it with almost any type of bread: white bread, whole wheat, or even leftover rolls. And while the Depression-era version might have been simpler, modern variations can include anything from caramelized apples to chocolate chips, making it a beloved dessert that has stood the test of time. While bread pudding has evolved over the years, its core remains the same: a humble, hearty dessert. Would you be trying this recipe with the leftover bread in your fridge? Talking about delicacies you could make from leftover treats, very few came close to the level of our next treat. 2. Baked beans. Next up is baked beans. This is one of those dishes that have stood the test of time, evolving into an American staple that many associate with comfort and tradition. This simple, hearty dish was made by slowly cooking beans with a mixture of molasses, brown sugar, and salt pork or bacon. It was a filling, affordable meal that could stretch for days, making it ideal for families struggling to make ends meet. Beans themselves have been an essential food in many cultures for centuries, prized for their ability to grow easily and in large quantities. They're rich in proteins and nutrients, making them an excellent food source. During the Depression, families turned to beans as a cost-effective way to feed large groups without breaking the bank. The classic recipe for baked beans includes white beans, often navy beans, which were soaked overnight, then cooked slowly with sweeteners like molasses and sugar, and sometimes flavored with bits of bacon or salt pork. The slow cooking process, often done in a cast-iron pot, allowed the beans to absorb all the sweet and smoky flavors, creating a dish that was both satisfying and nourishing. For many, baked beans were not just a dinner dish. They were often served with cornbread for an even more filling meal. On Sundays, when families might have had a little more time and resources to prepare a big meal, baked beans could be the centerpiece of a comforting, low-cost feast. The dish could also be made in large batches, making it easy to stretch leftovers throughout the week. Though baked beans were traditionally associated with New England, they became a comfort food across the United States during the Depression, especially in households looking to feed multiple mouths on a tight budget. As canned beans became more widely available, baked beans became an even more convenient option, and the recipe underwent various regional adaptations. Some areas swapped molasses for brown sugar, while others added mustard or tomato paste for a twist. Today, baked beans are often served at barbecues, picnics, and as a side dish to a variety of meals. You should try serving it at your next event. Talking about a treat that'll definitely go well with your next potluck. Family and friends won't be able to resist this next recipe. 3. Depression cake. Moving on, let's discuss one of the most innovative recipes developed during those dark times named Depression cake. Often referred to as wacky cake or crazy cake, this cake was a way to make a sweet treat without the luxury of ingredients that were scarce and expensive during the Great Depression. Made without butter, eggs, or milk, essentials in most cake recipes, this cake was born out of necessity, but turned into a beloved dessert over the years. The basic recipe for Depression cake is quite simple: flour, sugar, cocoa powder, baking soda, vinegar, vegetable oil, and water. That's it. No eggs, no butter, just basic pantry items that were inexpensive and easy to come by. The combination of ingredients might sound unusual, but the result is a surprisingly moist, chocolatey cake that was perfect for families needing a bit of sweetness to brighten their day. Though depression cake was originally made in a larger 9 by 13-inch pan, the recipe has been easily adapted to make cupcakes or even layered cakes. Over the years, bakers have added their own twists, sometimes frosting the cake with a simple glaze, or by incorporating different flavors like cinnamon or vanilla to give it a personal touch. Today, depression cake remains a nostalgic favorite, especially for those who lived through that era. Perhaps you're out of eggs and butter and you are craving some homemade cake. You can always give this a shot. You know what else you need to give a shot? This next amazing treat. 4. Rice and raisins. The next meal may seem like an unusual pairing, but tastes absolutely divine: rice and raisins. It's a simple, inexpensive dessert that combines 2 household ingredients, rice and raisins, into a filling treat. Often served as a pudding, this dish was a practical way to stretch a small amount of food into a meal that could feed several people. The ingredients were basic and inexpensive: rice, sugar, water, milk, and raisins. In some variations, spices like cinnamon or nutmeg were added for flavor. Rice and raisins was typically cooked by simmering the rice in water until tender, then combining it with milk, sugar, and raisins, and letting it cook slowly until it thickened into a creamy pudding. The raisins would soften and plump up as they absorbed the flavors, adding a touch of sweetness to each spoonful. The result was a dish that was both nourishing and satisfying, a perfect comfort food. Rice and raisins wasn't just a dessert. It could also serve as a hearty breakfast or even a side dish. Its versatility made it a go-to for frugal families, and it was a dish that could be enjoyed by people of all ages. In a time when food had to stretch, dishes like this showed just how creative families could get, transforming simple ingredients into something special. As times changed and more ingredients became widely available, rice and raisins faded from many family tables. However, the dish still holds a place in the hearts of those who grew up with it during the Depression, almost like a plaque of survival. Much like rice and raisins, our next dish was pretty up there when it came to survival food. 5. Hot water cornbread. Hot water cornbread is a simple yet flavorful dish that became a staple during the Great Depression, offering a practical solution to scarce ingredients. Made from just cornmeal, boiling water, and a pinch of salt, this bread was both affordable and satisfying. Unlike traditional cornbread, which requires baking, hot water cornbread is made by mixing cornmeal with hot water to form a dough. The dough is shaped into small patties and fried until golden brown, resulting in a crispy exterior and a soft, warm interior. This quick, easy recipe didn't require any eggs, milk, or baking powder, making it an ideal choice during times of limited resources. During the Depression, when families needed to make do with what they had, hot water cornbread became a reliable side dish, often paired with beans, greens, or stews. The bread absorbed the savory juices from the meal, adding flavor and texture. Its simplicity made it an affordable option for feeding families, and its crispy golden crust provided a comforting contrast to the soft inside. Over time, various regional adaptations appeared, with some adding sugar for sweetness or herbs for extra flavor, but the core recipe remained unchanged. Though hot water cornbread's popularity has faded, it still holds a cherished place in Southern kitchens today. Our next Depression-era treat was the epitome of comfort food: 6 bacon and onion sandwich. The bacon and onion sandwich became a popular meal during the Great Depression due to its simplicity and affordability. Made with just a few ingredients, bacon, onions, and bread, it provided a satisfying meal. While bacon was a rare treat during that time, households used it sparingly, stretching it by pairing it with sweet caramelized onions. The onions helped balance the salty richness of the bacon, making the sandwich both flavorful and filling. This sandwich was a quick and easy option for lunch or dinner. The savory bacon and the sweetness of the slow-cooked onions combined perfectly, creating a comforting dish. Toasted on a griddle, The sandwich had a crunchy texture that added to its appeal. Despite the economic struggles of the era, meals like this offered a taste of indulgence, made with what little was available. Bacon and onion sandwich faded as the economy improved and bacon became more accessible. However, it's still a fun and creative way to make use of whatever is left of your bacon dot. Talking about creatively made food, it didn't get much better than this next dish. 7 fried potato skins. Fried potato skins were a perfect example of the waste not, want not mentality that shaped cooking during the Great Depression. When resources were scarce, families made use of every part of the potato, including the skins. Potatoes were affordable and versatile, and by frying the peels in oil, a potential waste product turned into a crispy, flavorful snack or side dish. To prepare fried potato skins, leftover peels were cleaned and fried until golden and crispy. Seasoned with salt or whatever spices were available, they became a tasty and satisfying treat. Often served alongside other meals, the skins added a crunchy texture and savory taste to the dish, making them an excellent accompaniment. Though simple, fried potato skins highlighted the ingenuity of Depression-era cooks. Over time, as the economy improved, the dish evolved with added toppings like cheese and sour cream. It would make the perfect snack for a long afternoon right before dinner. But if you were looking for a heartier dish, you'd definitely have loved our next dish. 8 slumgullion. Slumgullion, a hearty and flexible stew, was a dish born out of necessity during the Great Depression. The word is believed to have originated in the mid-19th century, possibly from miners or sailors. Slum referred to a slushy or muddy substance, and gullion may have been slang for refuse or offal. It was a throw-everything-in-the-pot kind of meal, where families combined whatever ingredients they had, scraps of meat, vegetables, and even canned goods, to create a filling and affordable stew. Its origins go back to miners and pioneers, but it became a permanent fixture during tough times when food supplies were limited. There was no set recipe for slumgullion, and it varied from home to home. Some versions used ground beef or pork for the base, while others relied on potatoes, carrots, onions, or canned tomatoes for flavor and substance. The beauty of the dish was in its versatility. It was a one-pot meal that could feed a family for several days, making it a practical choice for resourceful cooks. Though its name sounds odd, slumgullion became a symbol of survival and comfort during the Depression. Simple and affordable, it provided a satisfying meal when money was tight. People who grew up with slumgullion often remember it not for its gourmet qualities, but for the comfort it provided to them during those dark times. Similarly, the amazing taste of this next treat was a bright spot in those dark times. 9 molasses cookies. Molasses cookies were a sweet comfort during the Great Depression, offering a rare treat which was not common then. Unlike more elaborate desserts that required expensive ingredients, these cookies were made with molasses, a cheaper sweetener that nearly everyone could afford. Molasses not only made the cookies affordable, but also gave them their rich, deep flavor and chewy texture. The recipe for molasses cookies was simple and used pantry basics like flour, molasses, baking soda, and spices such as ginger or cinnamon. The dough was easy to mix, and the cookies baked into soft, flavorful treats. They were often made in large batches, allowing families to enjoy an inexpensive yet satisfying dessert for weeks. Molasses cookies were a small luxury, especially for children during the Depression. Molasses was not only a cost-effective sweetener, but also packed with nutrients like iron, making the cookies somewhat nutritious as well. Even as times improved, these cookies faded, but it's still a fond memory for those who lived in those times. Our next staple wasn't just a dish whipped up to weather the Depression, it was also pretty good comfort food. 10 potato and onion pie. Potato and onion pie was another humble yet hearty dish that families relied on during the Great Depression. Potatoes, being inexpensive and easy to grow, were often the cornerstone of many meals, and this pie was a great way to combine them with the few other ingredients people had at their disposal. Onions added flavor and depth, making the dish filling and satisfying. The pie was usually made with a simple crust, sometimes just flour and water, and layered with thinly sliced potatoes and onions. Seasonings were often minimal, just salt and pepper, but some households managed to add butter or lard to enhance the flavor. Once assembled, The pie was baked until the crust was golden brown and the potatoes and onions were tender. In some versions, milk or cream was poured over the filling to add a little richness. But even without these extras, the dish was both comforting and nourishing. What made potato and onion pie so popular was its ability to stretch basic ingredients into a meal that could feed the whole family. It could be served as a main dish or as a side, and leftovers were just as good the next day, if not better. In an era where making every bit of food count was crucial, this pie was a creative solution to make simple ingredients feel a bit more special. Talking about special, our next treat took an unusual approach to creating a delicacy: 11 eggless pancakes. Eggless pancakes were a clever solution to the scarcity of ingredients like eggs and butter during the Great Depression. With basic ingredients like flour, baking powder, milk, and a little sugar, families could whip up a batch of these pancakes without missing the eggs that were often hard to come by or too expensive. The absence of eggs didn't diminish their appeal, as these pancakes were still fluffy and satisfying, especially when paired with syrup or a simple spread of butter. The process for making eggless pancakes was straightforward. Dry ingredients like flour, baking powder, and salt were combined with milk or even water in the leanest times to form a batter. Some families would add a bit of sugar or vanilla extract for extra flavor, but even the plain version was a treat for many. Cooked on a hot griddle until golden brown, these pancakes were a quick, economical breakfast that could feed the whole family. What made eggless pancakes special wasn't just the ease of preparation, but their adaptability. You could add whatever was on hand, sliced bananas, berries, or even leftover jam, to make them more filling or give them a sweet kick. Despite their simplicity, they became a much-loved breakfast option in homes across the country. You've run out of eggs? Not to worry. You could still eat those pancakes you were craving. You definitely needed eggs for this next treat, though. 12 egg drop soup. Egg drop soup was a simple, nourishing dish that many families turned to during the Great Depression when they needed to stretch their ingredients as far as possible. This comforting soup was made with a basic broth, often just water flavored with whatever seasonings or vegetables were available, and a few eggs. By whisking the eggs and slowly pouring them into the simmering broth, they formed delicate, soft ribbons that gave the soup its signature texture. This dish was incredibly versatile and could be adapted to whatever ingredients were on hand. Sometimes families would add onions, garlic, or even leftover vegetables to the broth to give it more flavor and substance. In its simplest form, egg drop soup was a light, protein-rich meal that could be made quickly and affordably. Despite its modest ingredients, egg drop soup was satisfying and warm, making it a popular choice for families looking to make the most of what little they had. It could be served as a starter or as the main meal when paired with a slice of bread or some rice. One thing egg drop soup had in common with our next dish was just how they would always give you more than your money's worth. 13 scrapple. Scrapple, a breakfast dish with origins from Pennsylvania Dutch cuisine, is a type of pork-based loaf made from pork scraps, cornmeal, flour, and spices. After the mixture is boiled, it is shaped into a loaf, cooled, and then sliced and fried until crispy. While not exclusive to Pennsylvania, scrapple became particularly popular in the Midwestern region of the U.S., where it was a common breakfast item in homes and diners alike. Scrapple was originally created as a way to use every part of the hog, particularly the less desirable cuts, making it an economical choice for families. Its rich, savory flavor made it a popular pairing with eggs and toast, or served with a drizzle of maple syrup for a sweet and savory contrast. Despite its humble ingredients, scrapple gained a loyal following thanks to its hearty, satisfying texture and taste. However, as breakfast habits shifted toward lighter, more health-conscious fare, scrapple's reputation as a pork scraps dish contributed to its decline in popularity outside of its home region. For many, the idea of eating a loaf made from various parts of the pig became unappealing, especially as breakfast meats like bacon and sausage rose to prominence. If a meaty dish like scrapple was a bit too out there for you, our next dish was more of the usual fare. 14 Johnny cakes. Johnny cakes, a traditional American breakfast food with origins dating back to the early colonial days, are thin, cornmeal-based pancakes that were a staple in the diets of early settlers. made from simple ingredients: cornmeal, salt, water, and sometimes milk or sugar. Johnny cakes were easy to prepare and could be cooked on a griddle or over an open flame. They were especially popular in the New England and Mid-Atlantic regions, where corn was a dietary staple. Johnny cakes were a versatile breakfast option, often served with butter, syrup, or honey, or used as a side to accompany meats like ham or bacon. Their crisp edges and soft interior made them a satisfying meal, especially when paired with coffee or tea. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, they were a common sight at breakfast tables, particularly in rural communities where cornmeal was readily available. As time went on and more modern breakfast options became available, Johnny cakes fell out of favor, particularly as wheat-based pancakes and waffles rose in popularity. The humble Johnny cake, once a symbol of early American resilience and resourcefulness, is now largely forgotten, except in certain regional pockets where tradition still holds strong. The simplicity of Johnny cakes brings to mind our next Depression-era staple, a once popular breakfast item no one sadly starts their day with anymore: 15 biscuits and gravy. Biscuits and gravy was a staple comfort food that provided a hearty and filling meal during the Great Depression. This dish, deeply rooted in Southern cuisine, was a way to stretch simple ingredients into something that felt more substantial. The biscuits were made from basic ingredients like flour, baking powder, and a bit of fat, often lard or shortening, which many families had on hand. Even in lean times, making biscuits was relatively affordable, and they could be baked in large batches to last several meals. The gravy, on the other hand, was typically made from meat drippings or fat, thickened with flour and seasoned with salt and pepper. In households where meat was scarce, even a small amount of fat could be turned into a savory, creamy gravy. Sometimes, families would add a bit of milk or water to the gravy to make it go further. Sausage gravy was a more luxurious version, but in many cases, the gravy consisted simply of what little fat and flour could be spared. The beauty of biscuits and gravy lay in its simplicity and its ability to stretch small amounts of food into something filling. The biscuits themselves were soft and fluffy, while the gravy added a rich, comforting element that made even a modest meal feel satisfying. This dish was often eaten for breakfast, but it was hearty enough to be served at any time of day. The most important thing about it was that, just like our next dish, it easily fed the entire family on a tight budget. 16 potato pancakes. Potato pancakes, often referred to as latkes in Jewish culture or simply as potato cakes, were a beloved dish during the Great Depression due to their affordability and versatility. Potatoes were a staple ingredient in many households because they were inexpensive, filling, and could be stored for long periods. When money was tight, potatoes were one of the few vegetables that families could rely on to feed everyone. To make potato pancakes, grated potatoes were combined with ingredients like flour, salt, and sometimes an egg to help bind the mixture together. The pancakes were then fried in hot oil or fat until golden brown and crispy on the outside, yet soft and tender on the inside. While the basic recipe didn't require much, families would often add whatever seasonings or extra ingredients they had on hand, such as onions, garlic, or herbs, to give the pancakes more flavor. In some cases, a bit of leftover meat or vegetables could be added to the mix. Potato pancakes were incredibly versatile. They could be served as a side dish with a main meal, or as a hearty breakfast when paired with a dollop of sour cream or applesauce. In times when meat was scarce or unaffordable, potato pancakes were a great way to fill up without breaking the budget. And since they were easy to make in large batches, they could feed a family for several meals, making them an economical choice during the Depression. Our next treat was also a hell of an economical choice for those trying times. 17 oatmeal meatloaf. Oatmeal meatloaf became a permanent fixture during the Great Depression due to its practicality and ability to stretch limited resources. With meat, particularly beef, being expensive, oatmeal served as an affordable filler, helping to bulk up the dish and make it go further. This budget-friendly meal was both hearty and satisfying, making it an ideal option for large families. The recipe for oatmeal meatloaf combined ground meat, typically a mix of beef and pork, with oats, eggs, if available, onions, and simple seasonings. The oats provided texture and helped bind the meat together. The loaf was often topped with ketchup or tomato sauce, adding a sweet and tangy finishing to the dish. The seasonings were minimal, usually just salt, pepper, and sometimes garlic or herbs. Families could adapt the recipe based on what they had in the pantry, incorporating leftovers like rice, breadcrumbs, or vegetables. This flexibility made it a great way to reduce food waste while providing a filling, nutritious meal that could be enjoyed over several days. Our next dish didn't keep as well, but it was just as great a comfort dish. 18. Potato soup. Potato soup was a simple yet comforting dish. Potatoes, being inexpensive and versatile, formed the foundation of this hearty meal. The basic recipe called for potatoes, water, salt, and pepper, with the possibility of adding other ingredients like onions, garlic, and milk or butter when available. What made potato soup so beloved was its simplicity and adaptability. Families could stretch the soup by adding whatever vegetables they had on hand, such as carrots, celery, or even leftover greens. Some variations included bits of bacon or ham bones for extra flavor, though meat was often a luxury. The potatoes cooked down to create a creamy base, thickening the soup without the need for thickeners like cream or flour. It could be improved by adding beans, rice, or extra vegetables, and richer by stirring in milk or cream when the budget allowed. Even in its most basic form, potato soup was cherished for its ability to feed a family without breaking the bank, making it a reliable, satisfying meal. Once you get past the unusual name of our next dish, you get to discover one of the most flavorful dishes of that era. 19. Stone soup. Stone soup is a legendary dish. Its origin tale centers on a traveler who arrives in a village with nothing but a stone and an empty pot. As the traveler heats the pot, he convinces the villagers that he can make a hearty soup from the stone, prompting them to each contribute small portions of vegetables, meat, or seasonings. By the end, the pot is full of a rich, flavorful soup. In practice, stone soup was a Depression-era dish that relied on whatever ingredients were available, often starting with just water or a broth, and then gradually adding whatever vegetables, scraps, or leftover meat could be spared. Common ingredients included carrots, potatoes, onions, and beans, items that were often on hand in many households. While the stone itself was more symbolic than culinary, the idea of using minimal ingredients to create a filling meal resonated deeply with families struggling to make do with what little they had. Stone soup faded with time as the economy grew into better times. It is a meal you'll hardly find on families' tables today. Perhaps you're feeling famished with very little money to spare. You could try out this very simple meal. 20. Cornmeal mush. Cornmeal mush was a simple and filling dish that became a reliable comfort food, especially for rural families. Made from cornmeal, an inexpensive and widely available ingredient, it was a go-to meal that didn't require many other resources. To prepare cornmeal mush, the cornmeal was slowly stirred into boiling water or milk and cooked until it thickened into a creamy, porridge-like consistency. The dish was often seasoned with salt, butter, or sugar, depending on whether it was intended as a savory or sweet meal. The beauty of cornmeal mush lies in its versatility and simplicity. It could be served hot or cold, and sometimes leftovers were sliced and fried into crispy pieces, offering a different texture. Whether eaten as breakfast, lunch, or dinner, cornmeal mush was easy to prepare and could be adapted to suit whatever ingredients were available. A drizzle of molasses, sugar, or syrup could sweeten it, while savory options like bacon or fried eggs could make it more hearty. For families facing the hardships of the Depression, cornmeal mush provided an affordable and dependable meal. So, there you have it. Some classic recipes from the Great Depression that show just how creative people got with what they had. If anything, these meals remind us that even when times are hard, a little ingenuity in the kitchen can go a long way. Thanks for watching, and if you're feeling inspired to try one of these dishes, let us know how it goes in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more food history and recipe ideas. See you in the next one.